When Tessa dropped this bomb, I didn't beg, I didn't cry, I didn't even argue. Instead, I did something so calculated it would make a chess grandmaster proud. Look, I know what you're thinking, another relationship drama story, but stick with me because this one has a twist involving a single party game that spun my entire life into chaos. Stay tuned to see how I handled this mess with some seriously petty style that will make you question everything you thought you knew about handling breakups. But first, let me tell you how I got here. The perfect relationship that wasn't so perfect. For years with someone makes you think you know them inside and out. That's exactly where I was with Tessa, completely convinced we had cracked the code on relationships while ignoring every warning sign that screamed otherwise. We met at some friend's birthday party, one of those cramped apartment gatherings where everyone's talking too loud and pretending the cheap wine tastes expensive. Tessa had this sharp wit that cut through all the party small talk, making jokes about the host's questionable music choices and the fact that someone brought a veggie tray to a party full of 20-somethings. I was hooked immediately, which should have been my first red flag, because desperation disguised as instant connection never ends well. We moved in together after a year because that's what you do when you think you've found your soulmate, and splitting rent sounds financially responsible. Suddenly, we were handling chores like roommates who actually liked each other, dividing up responsibilities without the usual passive-aggressive sticky notes. We told ourselves we were compatible because we both worked in tech-adjacent fields and kept similar schedules, as if professional alignment equals relationship success. Looking back, I realized love makes you stupid in ways that would embarrass a teenager. Tessa's brutal honesty, which I initially found refreshing, was actually just her being mean to people she didn't like. Her confidence, which seemed so attractive, was really just her inability to consider that she might be wrong about anything. But when you're wearing those rose-colored glasses, red flags just look like quirky personality traits that make your partner unique. Our relationship was like driving a rental car that looked reliable on the lot, handled well on short trips, and seemed perfect for the long haul until the engine started sputtering right when you needed it most. Everything felt solid and dependable, right up until it wasn't. When I finally proposed, I kept it simple because grand gestures seemed unnecessary for something that felt so inevitable. Just dinner at home, her favorite takeout, and a ring I'd been hiding in my sock drawer for 3 months. She cried, said yes, and immediately started talking about fall weddings and small guest lists. That night, lying in bed, we mapped out our future like we were following a GPS to happiness. House by the lake, kids in a few years, maybe a dog, definitely a 2-car garage. Everything seemed to be falling into place with the precision of a well-orchestrated plan. We were adults making adult decisions, checking off life milestones like items on a grocery list. Get serious relationship, check. Move in together, check. Get engaged, check. The next boxes were practically filling themselves in, and I felt smug about how smoothly everything was progressing compared to our friends' messy dating lives. But here's the problem with feeling too confident about your relationship. It's usually right before everything goes sideways. The engagement should have been our victory lap, the moment when we could finally relax and enjoy being the couple that had figured it all out. Instead, it became the beginning of the end, though I was too busy planning our future to notice our present was crumbling. The truth is, you can live with someone for years and still be strangers. You can share a bed, a lease, and a Netflix account while having completely different ideas about loyalty, commitment, and what it means to be in a relationship. You can plan a wedding while one of you is already planning an exit strategy. You can think you're building a life together while your partner is keeping their options open. Looking back now, I can see how naive I was to think that 4 years of shared routines and compatible schedules meant we were actually compatible as people. I mistook familiarity for intimacy, routine for stability, and planning for commitment. I thought knowing someone's coffee order and TV preferences meant I knew their heart and character. I was wrong about everything, but especially wrong about thinking that time spent together automatically equals time well spent. Hindsight has this cruel way of making everything obvious after the fact. All those little moments that felt like evidence of our solid foundation were actually cracks in the structure that I chose to ignore. Every compromise that seemed reasonable was actually me giving up pieces of what I wanted. Every time I told myself everything was fine, I was really just afraid to ask the hard questions that might have uncomfortable answers. The thing is, I thought I had done my research. I thought 4 years was enough time to really know someone, to see how they handle stress, disappointment, and commitment. I thought moving in together and getting engaged meant we were on the same page about our future. But it turns out that some people are really good at playing the long game, at keeping their true colors hidden until the moment when showing them becomes unavoidable. Red flags disguised as wedding jitters. Wedding planning reveals people's true colors faster than any personality test ever could. One day you're scrolling through venue photos together. The next day you're questioning whether you actually know the person sitting next to you on the couch. That's exactly what started happening with Tessa. Though at the time I convinced myself it was just normal pre-wedding stress because that's what desperate people do when they don't want to face reality. The Pinterest board abandonment should have been my first clue that something was seriously wrong. For weeks after the engagement, Tessa was obsessed with wedding planning like it was her full-time job. She'd show me color schemes at breakfast, text me flower arrangement ideas during my lunch break, and spend entire evenings researching photographers who specialized in that dreamy, soft-focused style that makes everyone look like they're floating through a romantic movie. Her Pinterest board grew to epic proportions, filled with everything from centerpiece ideas to cake designs that looked like they belonged in a museum rather than at a wedding reception. Then suddenly, radio silence. The Pinterest notifications stopped. The excited planning conversations dried up. When I'd ask about wedding details, she'd give me this blank stare like I was asking her to solve advanced calculus problems. The woman who once spent 3 hours debating whether our napkins should be sage green or eucalyptus couldn't be bothered to have an opinion about anything wedding related anymore. It was like watching someone lose interest in their favorite hobby overnight. Wedding planning stress became the universal excuse for everything weird happening in our relationship. Tessa seemed distracted during conversations. Wedding stress. She was spending more time on her phone than talking to me. Wedding stress. She forgot we had dinner plans with my parents. Wedding stress. I bought into this explanation because it was easier than admitting that maybe the person I was planning to marry was checking out of our relationship while I was busy picking out tablecloths and arguing with caterers about dietary restrictions. Love makes you rationalize behavior that would seem insane in any other context. When your friend's partner starts acting weird, you immediately tell them to investigate. When your own partner starts acting weird, you become a detective for excuses instead of red flags. I convinced myself that Tessa's sudden disinterest in wedding planning was actually a sign of her maturity, that she was above getting caught up in all the superficial details because she cared more about our relationship than the party celebrating it. Looking back, that logic was more twisted than a pretzel factory. Every wedding decision became a masterclass in procrastination. Bridesmaids? She needed more time to think about which friends deserved the honor. Wedding dress? The appointments could wait because she wanted to lose 5 pounds first. Venue booking? We had plenty of time to visit locations, even though the good ones were booking up faster than concert tickets. Her favorite phrase became, "There's still time," which she deployed whenever I brought up anything wedding related. This phrase became the relationship equivalent of "the check is in the mail," or "I'll start my diet on Monday." The most telling incident happened when she canceled our cake tasting appointment. We booked it weeks in advance, and I'd actually taken time off work because she said it was important to her that we do this together. The morning of the appointment, she texted me saying she had a client emergency and couldn't make it. When I suggested rescheduling, she said we could just pick something simple later. The woman who once spent 45 minutes explaining why buttercream was superior to fondant suddenly didn't care what our wedding cake tasted like. Small red flags started accumulating like items in an online shopping cart that you never actually purchase. Individually, each one seemed manageable, explainable, forgivable. Together, they formed a pattern that spelled out a message I didn't want to read. Little did I know these postponed flower choices and canceled cake tastings would be the warm-up act for a much bigger reveal. The most telling sign was how she talked about the wedding when other people brought it up. At parties or family dinners, when someone asked about our plans, Tessa would give these vague, non-committal answers that made it sound like we were maybe thinking about possibly getting married someday rather than actually planning a specific event. She'd deflect questions about dates and details with jokes about how stressful wedding planning was, how crazy the industry was, how much easier it would be to just elope and skip all of us. Meanwhile, I was becoming the sole wedding planner by default, making decisions about flowers and food and music for an event that was supposed to represent both of us, but felt increasingly like my solo project. I was the one calling vendors, comparing prices and trying to coordinate schedules, while Tessa floated through the process like a disinterested observer rather than an active participant. It was exhausting trying to plan a celebration of our love with someone who seemed to have lost interest in celebrating anything about us. The truth that I refused to acknowledge was staring me in the face every time I looked at our wedding planning timeline. You don't avoid planning the happiest day of your life unless you're not sure it's going to be happy. You don't procrastinate on decisions about your future unless you're not sure about that future. Wedding planning doesn't create relationship problems. It just forces you to confront the ones that already exist. All those delays and excuses weren't about stress or perfectionism or being overwhelmed by choices. They were about someone who wasn't sure she wanted to marry me, but didn't know how to say it.